We here have us with us today, Mr. Kishore Jain, the president of the Credai Association Bangalore chapter. He has been in the real estate industry since 1994 and has more than 25 years of business expertise and experience in the field of real estate, construction and development and residential apartments to his credit. He is also the managing director of Jain Heights and Structures. He has been instrumental in sculpturing few of the finest landmark elevations in the skyline of Bangalore. His extensive experience and impeccable reputation have made him one of the thought leaders in the real estate sector. A very warm welcome, sir, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
And I think to add on to Dhruv, I can say Mr. Kishore Jain has so much of insight regarding almost all industries that he was able to name one of his buildings Corona even before Corona happened. So I'm sure that foresight will definitely help us throughout this interview and like answer a lot of questions that we have, sir. Sir, to start off, I think it'll be amazing if you could just share a little bit about your educational and professional journey prior to incorporating your company and the experiences you garnered from being a mechanical engineer and eventually going into becoming a managing director of one of the most successful real estate companies in the city, sir.
So, as you already mentioned, I am a qualified mechanical engineer. Did my engineering year 1991, and subsequently started in the year 94 as a first generation company. I didn't have any professional experience where I have worked directly or employed with anybody as such. Started on my own because maybe from childhood, it was very clear in mind. I need to be an entrepreneur. That's it. I don't want to be employee. I have to be employer. I have to create job opportunity. So this was very clear in mind. It started in 94 as a construction company. Although the beginning always was a humble beginning, started with small, and one success led to another, and like this, for 10 years we were into construction contracting company. We were part of one of the major steel plant building that was in Ballari district, which happened to be my native place. And then 2004, we entered Bangalore real estate market. And it's been like 16, 17 years. And journey was quite interesting. Lot of learning, lot of exposure, experiences, and lot of maturity also gained. And most of them were learning by mistakes.
And sir, thank you so much for that. I'm sure it's a big motivation for all of us because for everyone in their mind, real estate industry is a highly capital intensive industry, and for you to tell that as soon as you were out of college and all that, because of your passion you were able to start it at a very humble beginning and you've reached to this level. I'm sure it's a big motivation to everyone that anything is possible as long as you're thinking about it.
True.
Dhruv?
To add on to that, sir, could you kindly shed some light on the role of Credai and your role as the president of Credai Bangalore chapter?
Historically, real estate was never a regulated industry. Even earlier, my childhood memory of real estate was something from Bollywood movies, where either villain has to be a gold smuggler or some developer, some builder who has to vacate hutments and build a five-star hotel. So I always wonder where so many five-star hotels are built. Okay? So this is how it was on those earlier days, and industry was not regulated. So any industry or any sector which has to grow and to reach a maturity stage, it needs to be regulated. I think in the year 1998 or so, few of the fellow developers have thought, why don't we have a self-regulation scheme? So they formed a like-minded developer who does compliance with all the regulatory mechanism of the city, and they work closely with the planning authority and help making the city beautiful. So basically, it was more of a self-regulated body of Credai. And apart from this, like any other trade association, there was exchange of ideas, exchange of knowledge, exchange of information. That was the second objective. The third objective was it was highly controlled sector. Until now, I would say one of the most highly controlled, regulated sector is the real estate only. If I look at the manufacturing sector, for one project to set up, they need various approvals. For us, every project is like a one manufacturing setup. So every project needs various approvals. In fact, recently we checked how many tables, how many NOCs for one project it has to go through in its life cycle. So we found around 2,227 tables are required for one project to complete right from inception till completion. It goes through this kind of red tapeism and bureaucracy. CREDAI's main objective is to interact with the government, bureaucracy, and policymakers to see that ease of doing business happens. In last 20 years of CREDAI's existence, to a larger extent, CREDAI was able to succeed in terms of ease of doing business. Presently, as we are talking, so already I would say all the various departments, all their whole process has become online process. It become more transparent, more accountable, and there is no kind of any kind of hodgepodge kind of things which either a officer can do or a developer can do. So end to end, we were successfully, along with the bureaucracy, able to streamline majority of the things. So this way, this ease of doing businesses are very, but still, what has been done is not enough. Still, lot has to be done. That is where the CREDAI acts as. And in terms of regulation, it's been 5 years, 4 years, 97. So central government has come up with this real estate regulatory authority. It's been only 4 years when the government thought to regulate, but we were all self-regulated from last 20 years or so. So this is in the nutshell the role of CREDAI. And CREDAI has got chapters across the country with 12,000 members, presence in every state. More than 250 chapters are there across the country. It's a very structured and with good governance trade organization, something at par with SOCAM and CIA.
Sir, speaking of CREDAI, how will you state the basic difference between a project of a CREDAI member with that of a non-member? Also, sir, what is the support provided to the end customer for a project of a CREDAI member?
So the difference between CREDAI and non-CREDAI member is the credibility. Because all CREDAI member, while becoming member, they give an affidavit, they vouch, they will comply with all the local planning authority and regulatory statutory requirement, and they will be watching for the ethical business practices. And any customer or any stakeholder has got any kind of grievances from those developer member of CREDAI, they can always approach to CREDAI Bangalore office, and we have a separate grievance committee where anybody who has got grievance against a developer, and not necessarily it has to be customer. Sometimes fellow developer will have some grievance. There also we mediate and see that grievances have been addressed. So that way, CREDAI plays a very significant role in terms of addressing grievances. Any of the stakeholders.
Got it, sir. Got it. Thank you so much for that, sir. So, like, little bit from whatever I've understood itself, that I've understood that the FSI norms have been extremely rigorous in our country, and a lot of states have different FSI norms as well. Now, where do you think these norms are going, and do you think there's going to be a slow process of change that's going to happening? And as you mentioned, is this probably one of the issues that CREDAI deals with by interacting with the government, sir?
See, any city has to grow, so the urban planner will define what should be the density per square kilometer. So the density per square kilometer depends upon the kind of infrastructure available. When I say infrastructure, it doesn't limit only to the physical infrastructure. It limits to social infrastructure, it limits to institutional infrastructure, it limits to economic infrastructure. So wherever these infrastructures are available, according to the growth of the city has to be planned. Plus, along with that, ecosystem has to be balanced. It can't be only construction. At the same time, they have to take care of those green zones. They have to take care of logistic part of it. They have to take care of those utilities, stormwater drain, water inlet, water outlet, sewerage treatment, and so many factors are there for defining the density of the particular location. One. Second, as a CREDI, we don't emphasize more on the FSI increment also. Whatever the available infrastructure is there, that's quite decent enough. Otherwise, traffic and other impact of unplanned development will affect every citizen of the city, including us. So what we negotiate more with the government is to build more infrastructure. I think heeding to those advices, the central government in the year 2015 has come out with smart city plan, something like satellite township to decongest the city. There should not be enormous, almost cities, all the cities in the country are dreaming, are like, whatever the infrastructure is there, we have built more than the capacity. So everybody is at the almost like bursting. So those kind of load is there, and we don't want to add more load to that. So the focus more is on developing infrastructure, coming out with the smart city plans. The government plans of smart city is brilliant, but at the same time, execution is pathetic. In case if they can execute whatever they committed, whatever they have announced, I think this is what more than what we could wish for.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much, sir. So, during the pandemic, the common retail customer's ability to purchase comparatively expensive investments like real estate has suffered significantly because of the lower disposable income, and all fractions of the society have faced a similar problem. Now, what steps do you think should be undertaken by the real estate industry in general to eliminate this systemic obstacle and like facilitate or like probably encourage demand in this particular industries?
You rightly said the purchase power of the common man has been impacted in a larger way. In a very significant way, it has been impacted. In fact, when we analyze and we put different papers to the government at the state level and central level, somebody who purchase a unit, residential unit from the developer, directly or indirectly, government will get 38% of the purchase value. When I say 38%, it starts right from the raw material as the land. On land, we pay stamp duty and registration fees. And then for construction, getting approvals, we pay huge sum of money in terms of various fees, duties, cess, and they won't end like that. Then for all construction material, there will be GST, and unfortunately, in our country, cement, which is the main ingredient of real estate construction, is considered as a luxury. So they charge 28% as a GST, and that doesn't end there. And then on the product, when we sell it to customer, customer also has to bear 12% of the GST cost. And then landowner whose land was there, he also end up paying a GST on that, and it's not enough. After that, then the income tax comes in picture, and then he comes and says, okay, whatever your guidelines value and whatever the conveyance which has happened, there will be again an income tax on a national deemed value also there will be taxation. Then there comes to the landowner the capital gain tax, and this is not enough. And once we do completion, power, data, and innumerable things, at the end, customer end up paying so much of money. Because whatever burden they lay on the developer, it will be all passed on to the customer. Time and again, we have requested to government at various level it to need to rationalize. You can't take 38% out of whatever we sell. You need to rationalize. And then again, the interest cost for the real estate, particularly, which is as per RBI guideline since 2004, it is considered as a negative sector. It's been 17 years, and RBI think this is a negative sector. So none of the public sector bank consider it as an industry and give those lower cost of borrowing to the real estate sector. Adding to the interest cost, which is very high, and again everything we passed on to the customers, end user only. Many times we requested to the government, give this as an industry status or infrastructure status, rationalize the borrowing cost. The main capital use borrowings are done from the real estate. So this being a very capital intensive.
Yeah.
Government won't heed to that. And adding to it, one more thing which I wanted to mention was, uh, I think something slipped, just it came to my mind. Anyhow, I'll continue further.
Sure.
Yes, sir. So speaking of the current times and the end customers, what is your suggestion to the end customers at this point of time to hold their existing investments, to invest further, or to dispose them off at the prevalent prices?
Generally, real estate is an end user driven market. Maybe earlier when the banks and financial institution and private equity funds, because of lack of funds, then there was a scope for investor. But generally, residential real estate is more of an end user driven, and because of the incentives like the stamp duty reduction in terms of reduction of 2% from the government and all-time low interest rate, housing interest rate of 6.7%. This is a great time for any buyers, home buyers, to buy the property. Prices are at rock bottom because of the various turmoil what real estate has gone through in the last 3, 4, 5 years. This is the right time. And somewhere we strongly believe it has reached bottom and the wheel has started moving upward. So already we are witnessing in some of the micro market across the country, already the prices are slowly hiking, going up. One of the reasons for hike in the price is post-pandemic. All prices have gone up. Cement prices 40 to 50% gone up. Steel prices again 30% hike. PVC, copper, clay, you name it, any of the construction material, around 270 industries, the construction industry supports. So among 270, I would say all of them would have increased their prices. Plus, there is a hike in the labor charges also. So this all input cost gone up, resulting the output product also, the cost will be very, very high. In coming days, I could see very clearly the prices have to go up. There is no other way for anybody to survive in this industry.
I think you did give an answer to my next question as well in this, sir. My next question was primarily like, how exactly do you think real estate companies should be dealing with this situation? There's so much of unsold inventory for a lot of companies, which does end up having a lot of cost on their capital as well. So, do you think it's the right time to dispose? But you did say that the prices you are expecting to go up in the next couple of weeks or months or over the short period of time. So, do you think they should hold on to their inventory and sell in the next couple of months, sir, or dispose it off at the current prices?
I will break up this thing into two parts. First is the unsold
Okay.
inventory part. It's a
Yeah.
general myth. There is a huge, everybody talks to me. There are some 2 lakh units are available which are unsold or so. And things like that, it goes on from the market, street level. But when we go with the data, the accurate data from the respective authorities, so on an average, from last 5 to 7 years, these are the verified data from the government authorities. Bangalore has a capacity to sell, or sale absorption is around 40 to 42,000 units per year. And when people say 1 lakh unit, 2 lakh unit, one need to understand any real estate project, so gestation period is around 2 to 3 years. And once you start the project
Mm.
and then complete, it will be anywhere between 3 to 5 years. So this is the
Yeah.
time. When someone says 1 lakh unit is unsold, it means From 0 to 5 years, this 1 lakh unit will be ready to deliver. It's not that today
Okay.
everything is ready to move in as such. It needs its own
Okay.
time to do the completion part, one. Second, you mentioned about whether the developer should hold or what they should do. Okay? I think it's the prerogative of every individual developer. And generally, real estate is more of a cash incentive. It's more about cash flow
Hmm.
game. Right? You
Hmm.
need a huge outflow every month on month. So you need to have a accordingly the cash inflow also. So based on
Correct.
the cash inflow and outflow and the cash flow position, every developer decide. More than its
Hmm.
margin, the price mechanism doesn't work on the margin like cost price plus profit is equal to sales price. This doesn't work here. It works
Yeah.
more with the market driven. What others are
Okay.
selling. You need to be aligned with the market prices. It's
Hmm.
not one individual. So, and majority of the developer based on the situation, sometimes they
Hmm.
make deal with zero profit, sometimes they make good money. It's always cyclic in terms of the circumstances.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Thank you for that insight, sir. I think that explains the structure of the real estate industry in an extremely well defined manner. So, in a recent convention hosted by the National Association of Realtors, the experts there believed that the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has slowed down owing to the heightened end user demand. So, and the residential segment is picking up faster than the commercial sector. What is your opinion on these statements?
In fact, the millennial, maybe of people of your age or maybe bit senior than you, pre-COVID, they were very mobile. Everything like there was Ola Uber category people, I would say, and everything was mobile, everything on rental, and residential unit was considered more as a need for bed or to someone bed and breakfast. That's it, nothing more than that. I think the pandemic has changed the whole perspective. Now they see this is their whole universe. It's not limited to bed and breakfast. It's their whole universe. This is where they live. This is where they work. This is where they do their fitness. This is where they get entertained. So everything had converged. All the aspects of life has converged into one home. Then they understood the significance of having their own home, that sense of responsibility, sense of security, that sense of belongingness. Owning a home, this is where you can have the right sense of emotion also. If you own a house, the emotions are different than if you rent a house. This is what has taught COVID, and people introspected and realized. And post COVID, this is what was significant. Everybody wants their own home, one. So most of the switchover was happened from rental to the owning one home, and other segment was which they wanted to upgrade because work from home or rather work from nowhere has become a sort of next normal. People feel they need one more space where they can work from home. When someone says, "Okay, I will not because of COVID, I will not go out and don't want to miss out on the fitness level," and they will have their fitness center within the house. Someone wanted to have their entertainment area instead of going back to theater and other places. And with the OTT being there, Netflix and Amazon, so everybody is switching and limiting their entertainment to home. So like this is a behavioral change which was witnessed in last 2 to 3 quarters. And whereas commercials are there, so we know how the things are malls, hospitality, and what's the first affected, still affected there. Because government every time the there is a hike in the COVID cases, they put more restriction first on the mall. Between more than a 1 year, none of the mall was able to do a break even over there. In same case with hospitality and some of those restaurant and standalone building, and you could see across everywhere there are a lot of vacancy in terms of commercial. It is purely because of lack of economic activity due to COVID. That was the only reason. But once things settle, maybe after 2 3 years when everything gets settled and where we were able to overcome this COVID, I'm quite confident commercial will come back. There won't be like
Okay, sir.
already the larger office and things are happening. It will come back to normal. Just matter of time.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. A lot of practical insight you've provided with that particular question. So the next question is not necessarily directly connected to the real estate industry, but something on a similar line. It was I wanted to really find out from you, like there's this up and coming global trend of renting out like spare rooms in your houses as part of how Airbnb functions, right? And do you think that is taking shape in India? And like if you think it does, how do you think that is going to reshape our current rental stay agreements, the typical traditional rental stay agreements? Do you think that's going to have a major drastic change towards it, especially in a more tourist friendly regions? Because now people want to go spend some time in the place that they're visiting, or like even for us like college students, it doesn't make sense for us to pay so much of deposit and like continue in an apartment where we don't even know what the next couple of months are going to be. So this culture of service apartments and renting spare rooms, how do you think that is going to impact the in that particular industry, the rental industry?
I think the rental industry is becoming more organized.
Mm.
The new age generation are not comfortable, or for that matter, nobody is comfortable on a day-to-day basis
Yeah.
dealing with the landowner. And there are some nuisance value of a landowner space, and sometimes reasonable demand, sometimes unreasonable demand. One. Second, I have seen some of the pathetic condition in which tenant lives, and particularly those working women, they won't get
Mm.
easily dwelling for their rental purpose. Dark, dingy place, complete disregard to the safety measures, and some of the
Mm.
people would treat it like, I would say it's like a pigeonhole. Okay? So I
Mm.
think those days are gone, and more organized players have already entered market since 2015. Not only Airbnb also, there are many domestic brands out there who are
Correct.
working very seriously on the co-living space, which offers
Yeah.
a multiple which co-living offers a multiple solutions, take care of all the needs and wants of the millennial or the working professionals. And some of the co-living, they get lease for a day also and for 10 years also. So that kind of flexibility they
Mm.
give. Very safe environment and all their social need, entertainment, amenities, food, laundry, whatever. Everything is being basically taken care at a very affordable price. I think
Correct.
considering so many benefits of co-living in a more organized manner, I'm quite confident co-living is the future. And already the pandemic has not hit. It was a temporarily pause on the co-living because of the
Mm.
restriction of the lockdown. And even co-living companies had geared up. They were able to maintain all the COVID protocols, how to make everyone safe. So those with protocols, I think they are bounced back. They're back in the business, and there'll be good response from the market also. People who look for rental,
Yeah.
I think that's the best option rather than going to some unorganized players.
Sure, sir. Got it. Makes sense, sir. So, do you believe that the pandemic has acted as a catalyst towards ensuring that real estate markets remain like an ever reliable investment option for the consumers?
Real estate was always real among all the
Yeah,
sectors. It was always real.
correct.
That's why it's known as the real estate. Only people sometimes forget it. So pandemic was a good catalyst only to remind
Yeah,
people the importance of having a physical asset, the real asset, rather than something notional which is there electronically, some number sitting somewhere. This is a real estate, physical asset where you can enjoy. Definitely, pandemic is rather. Initial days of pandemic, we were a bit concerned how the
yeah.
future holds, what will happen to the real estate sector. I think one quarter was uncertainty. After that,
Hmm.
things were very clear. The trends were very clear, and there was a paradigm shift in the behavior of the customer. And again, real estate
Correct.
bounced.
Sir, in fact, like I remember one of your speeches or somewhere I read about like you making this very good statement in my opinion, where your investment on earth should be in on earth. That's something that you said before is what I remember. So that I think that correlates a lot to the
Yeah,
this
yes.
question.
Sir, as you rightly mentioned, that the pandemic did definitely remind people about the importance of owning a physical asset. But the real estate industry right now is still facing an impending crisis. So the government did announce an alternative investment fund of 25,000 crore rupees for its revival. They also announced a rupees 3.5 lakh tax exemption on home loans whilst lowering the interest rates. So, sir, in your opinion, what role will these initiatives play in the full recovery of the market in the next financial year?
I think very interesting, insightful question also. Right. First, coming with the Swami Fund, the alternate investment fund announced by the central government, that is of around 25,000 crore. One. In fact, due to lockdown of 3 months or so, most of the project has been stalled. And real estate is a very cash intensive. Every day you need cash flows to be healthy. And RBI has a guideline, any debt which has not been serviced, either interest or principal for 90 days, it will be declared as an NPA, non-performing asset. And then there is a separate act which comes for the recovery of that project. This is one aspect. Whenever any damage happens, like pandemic, it was the lockdown for 2 to 3 months. The effect, the cascading effect, is felt for the next 3 years. It's like a dengue or a COVID itself. It lasts for 4, 5 days, 7 days, but the effect of it will be for 3 months. So something similarly, it happened in the real estate sector. One. Second, one more changes which happened in the real estate is there was a significant consolidation in terms of market. So those large listed players who have access to the cash flows, who have access to the liquidity, were able to sustain this impact. But then various small and mid-sized developers were not able to withstand this impact. And this led to huge trust deficit in the market. The customer beware. They said whether this project will be completed or not. So they moved more towards the larger, bigger player, either that or either project which is almost nearing to completion. So there it created a sort of disparity among the developers also. So there are developers who are doing very well, and there are developers who are struggling. I think COVID has differentiated between men and boys. This is what COVID has done. Second, coming to this Swami Fund or alternate investment fund of 25,000 crore, in fact, the requirement for the real estate sector, there was around 6 lakh crore worth of project was stuck at the various level. So that was the requirement. And against the 25,000 crore is what the government has allotted. Even again, as usual, government policies are beautiful, but executions are there where the real challenges lies. In fact, out of 25,000 crore, when we check last, how much money has been disbursed versus allotment, it came less than 10% was what disbursed among that because of various bureaucracy and nepotism. What was required for the government to do is they need to understand the business requirement. They can't everything go with rule books. If they would have considered the business requirement, a more pragmatic approach, if government would have given, then those ailing developers would have been benefited a lot. But on the contrary, what happened? When government failed, then the private developer, private player will come into the market. Well, talking to you already, there are some fund which was set as of last quarter, and even today also I read in the newspaper. One of the fund has created a stress fund of $1 billion. That is HDFC. So they created one stress fund, and like this, various private equity fund has developed distress fund for the real estate sector. I think those private funds who understand the business nuances and the requirements will be able to help to those ailing developers. Plus, they'll be able to unlock the value which was stuck in the previous budget. That will be a real help to the developers. One. Second, you mentioned on the lower housing home loan rates. I think that was the most biggest incentive for the customers to buy the property. And this is an all-time low. I have seen this such a low rate of interest was in 2003 or 4. After that, I haven't seen. It's a great opportunity, and this has really helped and really boosted the real estate sector.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that. So now, like in the 20, and this question like was very very important to me because I've seen what a big impact this plays, sir. But like in the 21st century, we seem to be living in a digital era, wherein like almost every single industry has revolutionized the way they do business, and to prepare themselves like according to the needs of the customer. But in this regard, the real estate industry, in my opinion at least, seems to lag behind a lot. Most of the processes are manual in nature, and it takes so much of substantial amount of time, which affects the overall profitability and efficiency of a business. Like even approvals, for example, it takes so much of time by the time an approval is completed that the efficiency of the business is definitely lost. Now, in your opinion, what role do you think technology can play in the real estate industry, and how long do you think it would take like for these changes to be implemented? Because I'm sure like in a lot of countries abroad, you can apply for approvals online, it will be verified quickly, and like approve, like you can start construction immediately and all that. In India it doesn't happen that way. So what's your take on that, and how do you think technology can play a role, sir?
There are three stages of real estate business. One is called the approval part, second is the production or execution, and third is selling, which is for any business that produce and sell. These are the two functions of business. So here we have one more that is called approval part. During my initial comment, I mentioned that we have continuously worked with government and relentlessly, untiringly, over a decade or so, it has given some of the desirable results. Well, talking to you, like BBMP has gone completely online in terms of approval process. Same case with other NOCs like fire department, where CREDAI has came forward, given them a software and said you use this software to give us NOCs. And with BBMP also, we only sponsored the software. We bought the software, we given them, trained these officials, and ensured that there will be an online seamless process. The same thing goes with the various industries, various departments in terms of giving us NOCs and approval process. Today, I think there is a significant progress has made on the approval process. But in spite of that significant process, still government adopt that hybrid approach. They do online plus as well as they do manual also. The moment it comes manual, it lacks transparency, it lacks accountability, and you'll be clueless what is happening. So again, time and again, we need to push. I think now the challenge is from hybrid to complete online is the challenge. With over a period of time, it will be also taken care. This is with respect to the approval, including the land registration also. There were time like, the sub-register office can work till midnight, 12 o'clock. It's been more than 10 years. Everything is all online, server controlled. 5:30, then it's cut off. You can't manipulate the system in terms of registration of the properties. So there are significant development and much more is required for them to do. I'm quite confident in coming days that will be taken care of. This is one aspect. Second, in terms of production, execution or construction, I have seen in last 25 years, when I entered into the sector, the construction was at a very, very primitive stage. Always in our country, construction technology is at very primitive stage. But in 25 years, what are the changes has happened in terms of processes, in terms of some of like be it block masonry, be it concrete, be it machinery, a lot of automation has come, right? But when I compare with the Western world or the rest of the globe, still we are not at par with them in terms of uses of technology. One. Second, in terms of processes, I think the kind of software are available in the market, and almost invariably every developer uses them. Those processes become end-to-end seamless in terms of procurement, in terms of designing, in terms of billing, and various processes which are auxiliary department for the production or in terms of construction. So a lot has been done, right? There was a but slow movement. A lot still is need to be done in terms of adapting
Okay.
technology. And third aspect is the sales part. This is one part where I think we have completely adapted to the technology. In fact, gone are those days when customer, in fact, today 90% plus customer will search the property online only. You need a home, you need a rental. First thing you do, 90%, more than 90% of the people will go online only. So right from
Correct.
the search, it will be through digital work, online only. Second, during COVID, I think every organization, every real estate developer has adapted to the technology in terms of sharing information to the customer, customer engagement, customer payment, and everything is going seamless end to end through digital.
Correct.
There are like uses of VR, AR, augmented reality, virtual reality. You don't have to go and visit, make a site visit. Like everything you can do sitting at your home. There is sort of
Correct.
virtual tour of the property. Only one thing which customer goes to the site is to feel the property. Feeling is one part which technology will never be able to replace it. Just all can be done.
Yeah.
For that, they for a positive base vibes, वगैरह to feel they only for that reason only they go to the site. Otherwise, all information with the help of technology, sitting at their home at their convenience, they'll be able to do it. Even customer engagement, because all the sales people are doing off late virtual meeting. The negotiation part, the closure part is all happening through virtual meeting only. And finally, the payment also is through the online mechanism. I think the
Yeah.
end-to-end process in the sale, even marketing, digital marketing, everything has become virtual only. There, I would say, complete adoption of technology in the sales process.
Correct, sir. Agreed, sir. Like I think like you said, the last part of selling and all that has been a lot of virtual and technology has been used. But again, sir, coming back to my point, I feel like in Bangalore, because it's a little more developed than other cities in India, there's a little bit of technology involved when it comes to, or like you said, hybrid of thing when it comes to approvals and all that. But in smaller cities, tier 2, tier 3 cities, I think that is yet to start coming. And for those cities, for them to develop, I think it is going to take a while. But that is where like I felt the major problem also. But makes a lot of sense. Sir. And I know we're running short of time, but since you spoke about the technology and this process and also, I just wanted to take a small idea on what you think about prefab, because in my understanding of prefab, like a lot of Indian customers are not yet willing to accept that form of construction. Do you what is your take on that, sir?
See, any kind of changes you bring, any kind of new technology, any kind of innovation, it's quite obvious to have resistance initially. Anything.
Correct.
Even computers were resisted during Rajiv Gandhi period.
Yeah.
People were resisting those changes. So it's quite natural for people to resist. Maybe because any kind of standardization will not give them scope for any customization. That was their only concern. But in terms of the benefit of standardization is in terms of speed, in terms of quality, in terms of consistency, is unparalleled. I think
Correct.
prefab is the future of construction industry.
Okay, sir. Okay.
So,
Thank you for that. So
and
that clears a lot.
yeah.
Sir, as a visionary leader, what is your personal mantra to steer clear of unprecedented circumstances that may lie in the near future for anyone, especially in like the volatile time that we are living in? For business in general, what is your personal mantra, sir?
There's no one mantra. I think different situation, different mantra. And
Okay.
there is nothing like one. But if you have to be a real estate developer, you need nerves of steel. You need a lot of patience.
Huh.
Then you can become a
Okay.
real estate developer. Otherwise,
Okay.
every day the sector throws you challenges. It will shake you on a daily basis. You need to move on, take everything into your stride. Patience is the key for
Okay,
real
sir.
estate.
Okay, so I think that ties in line with your company motto of style and stature. The stature part you just did bring up. Yes, sir. Dhruv?
lastly, sir, what is that advice that you would like to give to a budding entrepreneur about the general business culture in India?
See, India, when Modi government took in 2014, out of 190 countries, World Bank does one indexing, ease of doing business index. So India was around 130 ranking among 190 countries in the world. I think in the last 6, 7 years, we have reached to last, it was 62. So we are the ease of doing business. And ease of doing business will have different parameters, which is very robust kind of survey and indexing, and very credible also, because it will be done by World Bank. So that way India has changed completely. And the kind of growth opportunity, if you see at global level, I think the India is the present and future. Like the growth opportunity, what India is throwing to the world, it was unprecedented, unparalleled. We are quite bullish on India. I think next 10 years, but people say 10 years, but I would say next 2, 3 decades, the it's an Indian story which will be going across the globe. And India, we are already seeing the initial trend. It's on the path of becoming a superpower in terms of diplomatic relation, political thing, economically, and the kind of potential India has got, even in terms of knowledge also. This is few of the country which has got civilization of more than 5,000 years old. Even if you go, there may be more than 5,000 years old also. And India is rich in culture, rich in minerals, rich in population also, that's adding to it. And these are all trends. But when you see the numbers, if you see the economic parameters of this country, currently in terms of GDP and other fiscal parameters, I think what was China in the year 2005-6 and current India, it was almost same. So that much of scope is there for India to grow to that level, considering 1.3 billion its population. So what is today China? You could see India will become in next 20, 30 years or so, but definitely in a more rightful manner, more ethical manner, in a more meaningful manner. So ease of doing business, entrepreneurship, and I think always everyone has option of picking up 9 to 5 job. But if you like thrill and adventure in your life, one should try this taste of entrepreneurship. Trust me, once you
Yes.
taste, you won't leave it for life.
Sir, I'd like to say at this point of time, for me personally, you were a big motivation, sir. Thank you so much for your insight on the entire industry. I'm sure all the viewers are going to enjoy listening to this conversation and have enjoyed. And it was absolutely brilliant having you on this platform. So thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you so much. Welcome. All the best for your fest.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.